Right. Hi again, Momtellectuals. This is the second part of my conversation with Caryn Gillen. She's a life and business coach, and we are continuing our conversation about pushback because we both have had the experience of creating our own definition of success and are having to sometimes deal with people who don't think that it's a good enough definition of success. And I wanted to talk about when that person is yourself.
Because
Right?
it often is first.
Yes. Did you want to just talk a little bit and reintroduce yourself a little bit in case this is the first time that they're hearing from you?
Yep. I'm Caryn Gillen. I'm a life and business coach for coaches, and I also work one-on-one with CEOs and founders.
Cool.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah.
So you and your
the
introduction,
internal voice.
yeah, you made me think about something that I think happens and we have to catch it because it's almost non-existent, is we have a dream or an idea of success, but it's so lofty, weird, different, not okay that we don't even let ourselves think about it. And so it's almost like there's never even a chance for external pushback. And we barely even give it an ounce of oxygen for internal pushback before we put it away. Not today, not for us. So I think there's like those little glimmers of potentially what success could look like for us or fulfillment that we don't even let come in the door. And then there's the ones we're more conscious of.
Okay. Yeah. So what if people aren't even really aware of it? What are some ways you mentioned in just at the end of the last episode, if you're bored, you should pay attention to that. I'm thinking that might be a clue that you need to follow a glimmer, but what maybe, I think in coaching quite often I hear people talk about awareness as kind of the first step, right? Not always an easy one, because just like you're saying, sometimes something wants to come in and you're like, nope. So what are some techniques that you recommend people, for the brave souls out there who are willing to try to become more aware of a glimmer of something different that might not be totally comfortable?
Yeah, I think the step before being awareness and being with your awareness of what you might want is allowing space for it to come up in the first place. So if you're somebody who's always going check, check, check off the to-do list, running, one thing to the next thing, constantly scheduled, there's no time for the thing to come in.
Okay.
Right? That means in a certain way, we can kind of schedule ourselves so much that we're basically in a survival mode of living, even if we're doing all the things we think we should be doing and that look good.
Okay.
But there's just not enough space for something to come in and say, but hey, have you really thought about ceramics? I think you might want to be a potter, right? But there's no space for that. But so let's say you have the space to have a random thought float through your mind about something that seems illogical, unlike you, but yet oddly exciting. That's the glimmer.
Okay.
And the next thing you can do, you've made some space, you've allowed it, is just to acknowledge that it's there without, and this is where I think you have to give yourself this permission. I can see this thing. I can understand that it's there. I can look at it. I could even read a book about it, but that doesn't mean I have to do anything with it ever.
Okay.
Because sometimes the things that come through are terrifying, or they're like, that goes against my way of life entirely, and I don't have any space for that. But you are allowed to have the thought.
Okay.
Yeah. So then it's just acknowledging it's there. Okay. I'm not bad for having had a new idea about what maybe my life is for, or what might be successful or fulfilling or satisfying for me. And then just seeing I like the question of what's the next tiny step I can take towards that thinking, that idea, that energy, etc. It could be, like I said, a book. It could be like, I'm going to let myself Google this while I'm in front of the TV tonight and there's truly nothing else happening. And I can just go down that rabbit hole, set my timer for 5 minutes and see what happens.
Okay. Yeah. When you're talking about keeping busy, it reminds me, we talked a little bit about grief in the last conversation. And that's a way people deal with grief too, is just to keep busy. And it's a way of numbing out.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm going to keep doing, and so I don't have to deal with my feelings.
Right.
And it's hard we're not taught how to grieve.
Right.
We're not taught how to heal from grief. We're either told, you have a couple days, if your parent dies or something, you have a couple
Something
days,
massive like that.
right?
Yeah.
But
right.
I mean, it's like you're supposed to be back at work in like 3 days or something, right? Like you get a couple days off to plan the funeral and go, and then you're supposed to be back at work. And heaven forbid if you sit at your desk and cry, like you're expected to be normal. Or there's a small set of circumstances in which you're never allowed to be okay again. Like if your child dies, there's often people who are like, no, you just can never ever recover from that. You'll never be okay again. So there's either be okay now or good luck. Like, sorry, you're going to be wounded for the rest of your life. But there's almost nothing in between.
Well, we're not taught how to do any feeling. Like you can be mad, sad, or happy. These are the emotions that there's space for, that we can kind of like put words to and understand as a culture, really.
And I think that's gendered too, right? Women are allowed to be sad, men aren't. Men are allowed to be angry, women aren't.
Right, right. Yeah. So we have these 3 emotions, 2 maybe depending on your gender, that we're allowed to feel. And then there's the box that you're allowed to feel them in. And that box isn't very big.
Yeah.
So then if we can't handle our own emotion, no one else is going to be able to. Like if I can't make space for my own feelings, and sometimes feelings are really scary, and it's like, if I really let myself go down this hole, will I ever come out again? And in those cases, like you do want to have somebody do it with you. That's why people hire therapists. I want to go explore things that feel too big for me to do on my own. And that is right and good. But like, can we experience the full breadth of happiness? Can we experience joy, like unhinged? Is it safe? What does that look like? Because we see it in toddlers. Like they come in with all the resources. We all had this. But what we do is everybody just says, don't do that, or don't do that here, or don't do that in front of those people. And then it's like, well, where exactly do I put all of this emotional bandwidth? Because I haven't seemed to found a place like yet where people really want to see it all.
Yeah. Well, I talk to people too about watch your toddler. And that's kind of what normal emotions look like. Not necessarily the behaviors, but like obviously an adult throwing themselves down on the floor and hitting the floor with their hands, not necessarily going to recommend that, but you can, their emotions are very visible, right?
Yeah.
Joyful 1 second, sad, angry the next, and but it's very much responding to what's actually there.
Yeah.
And
in the moment.
Right. And that's what, our emotions are trying to tell us, like what's going on, our reactions to what's going on. But then, as adults, we put the hamster wheel on top of it.
Yeah.
And there's the hamster wheel of what we shouldn't be feeling and what we shouldn't be doing. But there's also the hamster wheel of, oh, I wish I hadn't said that last week, or, what's going to happen next week. And it's not about what's really there anymore.
Right. And emotions are really the fuel for our lives. Like that's what gets us to take action is feelings. And if we're unwilling to go into certain feelings, then that means the emotion that's running your life could be avoidance.
Mm.
Like, so I'm going to avoid all that stuff. So that means what is the type of action that avoidance creates? And is that what's creating my life? And how much of that am I doing? How much of my life is fueled by avoidance or fear or shame or anger versus, what's in there? What's creating this story?
Mm-hmm.
Who's writing your memoir?
Yeah. Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's good to know.
Yes.
It's good to notice, like, why am I doing the thing I'm doing? What's the emotion that's motivating this? Is a fun question to ask. And if it's
Mm-hmm.
fear, it's like, okay, well, would I want to do it? Like, what if I did it from love? What would that look like? What if I would I do it at all if I didn't have this fear?
Mm-hmm. So making space so that
Yeah.
you need to make space before you can become aware. Becoming aware, you talked about just giving things a little bit of time and space and room, and almost like, I think, is it Seth Godin who keeps saying the what if. Ask yourself just what if this, what if that, instead of feeling like almost trapped in it. It's like if you give things a little bit of space, does that mean like sunk costs, right? There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
stuff about sunk costs, about psychologically we don't like to, if we've invested in something, we will
Yeah.
keep investing in it because we don't like to feel like we've wasted what we did. And I
Yeah.
wonder how much of that, actually thinking about sunk costs, is keeping us where we don't want to be.
Hugely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like the research is it's kind of hilarious and alarming on sunk
Mm-hmm.
costs, like how much money somebody is willing to spend or how much time they're willing to spend because like I've already put an hour, so I'm going to give it 10 more. Or I've
Yeah.
already put in $100, so I'm definitely going to spend another 10,000. Like we have to really watch out for what am I hanging on to for dear life that isn't working just because it's the way I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
The faster we can just decide to let things go that aren't working, the greater wealth we have of time and resources.
Mm-hmm. And it is a huge mind shift to sort of say, okay, well, I have spent this time, so that time's gone. I've spent this money, so that money's gone. And it's gone whether or not you spend more.
Right.
You just are you going to
You
throw
don't get any of
more?
it back.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but it's a very different way of thinking about things than most people tend to. But
Mm-hmm.
and relationships are hugely that way. I don't know how many people I've heard say, well, we're friends because we've been friends for years, or
Yeah.
we've been friends because I've known them since high school. I'm like, yeah, but they're kind of dragging you down, and every time you talk to them, you talk about how horrible they made you feel, and oh yeah, but we've been friends for a long time, so
Mm-hmm.
does that mean you have to be friends tomorrow?
Yeah.
Because yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
it's so definitely it's not just money, it's also time, and the feeling like I don't know, we've put up with this for so long, maybe we have to keep putting up with it. I don't know exactly
Yeah.
what it boils
I like
down
to
to sometimes.
think about everything. Like, does this give me energy or take energy away? Like
Mm-hmm.
the work I do, does it give me energy or take energy? And I'm not talking about
Yeah.
money. Um,
Yeah.
at certain times we don't have to be working always just for the money. And when we don't, then it's what is this doing for me? What is this giving for me besides just that money return? And it should
Mm-hmm.
be energetically increasing. I think that's when the world gets better.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's, again, we're talking about awareness. That's a good thing to pay a lot of attention to, is how,
Mm-hmm.
and it's back to emotions too, right? How do things, how are you feeling when you're doing something?
Yeah.
And I'll say, like writing my book, there were some times I plugged through, and learning how to format it wasn't really, honestly, it was interesting, but it was also a slog.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not that everything is going to be what unicorns farting rainbows and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Right.
But how do you tell the difference? How do you tell the difference between something that's a slog but worth it and something that's a slog and you should pivot or do something else?
I think one foolproof way is to know what your values are and then see which of my values am I honoring and doing this or stepping on.
Ah,
So I keep mine on a sticky note attached to my desktop right here. Spaciousness, wholeheartedness, connection, growth, and integrity.
okay.
And usually when something's feeling off, I'll be like, check in. Oh, it's because like there's no growth here and there's connection, but it's maybe not the kind that I want to have.
Okay.
And so, well, maybe it's a spacious decision. If it cuts off growth and connection, then I get to be a no. And I think having a set of values that help us make hard decisions makes making those hard decisions easier.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like, oh, they're going to think I don't like them or they think whatever, I don't value what they're doing. It's like, no, I had to make this decision because it's not in line with my values right now.
Yeah.
You keep going. You do you. I'm going to do me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something too, that it's an exercise I include in my book. I have on my website, I have a list of 50 values and then another list of like 200 odd.
Yeah.
Because I know whenever I've been doing that exercise, I want them right in front of me. Sometimes people have a
Yep.
hard time coming up with value words.
All the time people have a hard time coming up with value words. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but I think it's a really interesting exercise to do. I think it's really difficult sometimes for us to cross values off the list because we get that inner voice. Well, family should be my top value. Well, maybe.
You have to think about umbrellas. Like
Yeah.
there's the larger umbrella value and then all the ones that fall under it. Like for a while, my value of connection, I had it as community.
Okay.
But when I thought about it, I was like, it's not actually community. It's all these connections that I make within community. And so I made it a connection and that felt just way more clear for me.
Mm-hmm.
But under connection is family, our friends, is neighbors, is, all the other stuff.
Yeah. I've got
Yeah.
one of my top 5 that is not a word in English. I don't know the word because it is like you're talking, it's partly connection, it's partly community, and it's partly collaboration. And
Love it.
it's just something. There's no word that I've been able to find
Yeah.
in English. I kind of know that it's all those 3 things, but there's something because it's partially it's partially work. It's partially coming together and creating something together.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you're saying is really important. You get to have your own names. Like you could have one that's cozy. Cozy is not necessarily a value. You can have it. I just got off of a client call and one of her values is pizza.
Okay.
She knows what it means. I don't exactly know what it means, but I don't need to. Yeah. She's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's pizza. It means a lot of things.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I think so that I think it's worth doing that exercise. I think you're right. It does make hard decisions easier.
Yep.
And I really do think it can make some things a lot clearer. I also think so giving yourself permission to maybe not mean the same thing by family as somebody else means by family, because
Exactly.
that's the example I use the best. I'm like, pick the word, but then spend time journaling about what that actually means for
Yeah.
you. Because the family thing, I'm like, well, some people say they value family. That means they work horrible hours and never see their family because they're providing for their family, or to somebody else, it could be the time they spend, right? It just doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. But also giving yourself permission to change them.
Yes. They do change as we do.
Yeah. Like when I became a parent, I think probably like a huge transition like that probably would have changed had I known what they were before. Probably they would have changed a little bit. And so giving ourselves the permission to revisit those things, because it is a really powerful tool.
Yeah.
And I know right now, kindness is what I would say is my first number one. And it's why it's provided some insight to me about the things that really tick me off the most.
Right.
Right?
When kindness gets stepped on, you get the most mad.
If somebody seems
Yeah.
cruel, I'm like, I got
Yeah.
no time for you. Like that
Yeah.
is it, and it is a value moral,
That's
and
the
it's
best way to find your values though, is like if you're struggling, is to be like, where have I been the most pissed in the last in my life?
right.
That's how I find mine for integrity. I didn't realize it was such a value for me until I was just getting repeatedly just incensed at like these certain things that were I'm like, oh, I really, really appreciate integrity a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you can, five people can get really mad at the same thing, but for five very different
Different reasons.
reasons, right?
And that's
And so,
perfect.
yeah,
Yeah. Like that's what
like,
this is all pointing back to. This individuality of success is from
mhm,
individuality of values, from everything about us is extremely different from the person right next to you, even if you're
mhm,
related to them. And
yeah.
it's just the way it is.
I remember a friend of mine is in a wheelchair, and she told me about a trick her cousins played on her, wheeling her into sand and then leaving her there.
Oh my God.
And she was livid and I was livid, and but she's like, independence is her
Mhm.
top value, and I couldn't get out, I couldn't do, and I'm like, that was so mean. So
Yeah.
we both got so angry at the situation, for based on two totally different values.
Yep.
And it was fascinating. But yes, looking at a situation that makes you angry and figuring out why is a very, very good clue for what you value, especially
Yep.
if you want to use the word evil. That was evil,
Yeah.
right? Because that, to me, evil is wrong, is kind of almost like a logical thing. But when you're willing to say that feels evil,
Mm.
to me, that's a clue that you're really stepping on your values and what you think makes somebody good or evil, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
yes. And so back to the inner voice, do you think knowing your values can really, an inner voice to me is, it sounds like it should be from you, but often we hear ourselves repeating things that other people have told us,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's where the values can be really helpful. So it's, if I have this value of integrity and then I learn a new tactic for business and it's what everybody's doing and it tells me like, oh, it's going to get you to your goal of X number of dollars. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. But my whole body is saying, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't
Yeah.
do it. It's out of integrity. Like, I don't need to do it. That's not success for me. If it works for those people, might I have a pang of envy? Yes. Like, dang, like I wish I could do some of the things these people do. It looks like it works so well for them, but I can't.
Yeah.
I cannot physically do some of the things people are doing in business because of my value of integrity.
Mm-hmm.
I make less money because of that, and I'm okay with it because that's what feels like success for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I worked out my criteria for success, and money is number 6. It's
That's awesome.
not on the list, but I know my top one, and I know number 6, and the 4 in between. Different times they come in different orders,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Yeah.
genuinely being able to feel like I help people,
Mm-hmm.
like, if I could make a whole bunch more money, but would have to do it by, I don't know, selling t-shirts or something that doesn't feel to me like it's making a meaningful difference to people,
Mm-hmm.
it, I'd rather do something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So it, and it took time, and it took time, and it took effort to look at those things and what I really wanted. But it also took making some mistakes.
Yeah. It's an excavation process.
Mhm.
And, there's a lot of dirt involved in excavation.
I
Right? There's
guess.
always like, there's this big boulder in my way. I wish I could work around it, but really I have to move the boulder sometimes.
Mm, yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes you need help, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. Well, thank you very much. I will do a write up. You've given lots of really good solutions, good food for thought. I don't necessarily, because like we've said, different people are individuals and stuff, and different people have different paths, but I like being able to give people some nuggets that they can use as they choose, right?
Right. Yeah. Check in
So,
on.
yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you
Thanks
very
for having me.
much. It was great to talk to you again.
Thank
And
you.
I think you've provided some insights that people can take with them on the road. And
Perfect.